Good morning. Good to see you here. Good to have a little bit of sunshine outside and the beginnings of spring. As we go through this whole series, I'm getting used to the visuals here since you've changed things around. It looks wonderful. Giving up and letting go. Pastor John wanted me to talk about giving our worries to God. And what does that mean? So, why would we want to give our worries to God? Our worries cause a level of anguish within us. It causes us fear and dread. And even more so, our worries distract us from the very call that we have to be God's followers, to follow His Son, Jesus Christ. It is very hard to focus upon the Lord and being able to share His light and word when we're wrapped up in our own internal struggles. So we try to place our worries upon the Lord because He is willing. I'd like to go to Psalm 55. And I want to read a little bit before what's up on the screen. I'll be starting at verse 1. And I like the way that the psalmist put these words. Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught at the voice of my enemy and at the stares of the wicked, for they bring down suffering upon me and revile me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death assail me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me. I said, oh, that had I the wings of a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from the tempests of the storm. We want to run and flee from our anxieties, our fears, our worries. How often have you encountered, whether it be yourself or a friend, I'm just going to leave this town and start over someplace new. Or even on a smaller scale, I'm leaving this factory, I'm leaving this company, and I'm going to go work for somebody else, and things will be completely different. We want to run. But the sad thing is, in our running, we run with the luggage of our worries. We take them with us to each place we go, whether it be a new job, whether it be a new town, or even if it's even in a new relationship. We carry them with us. So what are we called to do? What is our purpose as believers in God and followers of Christ? Well, later on in Psalm 55, we have clear instruction. Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall. Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. The psalmist obviously has a lot of concerns, a lot of worries. The Psalms of David, we hear over and over again the worries that he has, but he casts them upon the Lord. He trusts in the Lord. We need to do that. But we have a struggle. We're not always trusting in the Lord because we physically can't always tangibly see the Lord. And then also, we have a little bit of pride. We're Americans. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. I was all excited when I became a pastor, and I thought I'd use that as a sermon illustration, and I got myself some boots, and I pulled them up by the bootstraps. I got the cheap boots. The bootstraps broke. So we can't always count on our own abilities to carry us through. So we need somebody else to help us. No one person is stoic enough, strong enough, able to endure everything alone. We need somebody to confide in, and that is the Lord. But why should I cast my cares and worries on the Lord? Does the Lord know my struggles? We know that He's omnipotent and omnipresent. We know that He has the ability to see all. He created all. But how does He really know what I'm going through? I mean, who does He think He is? Does He think He's God? Oh, yes. He is God. So we go to another psalm, and we see the words that remind us that, yes, He would be able to know our problems. Psalm 139, starting verse 1. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from far away. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely, O Lord. It's humbling to think of God's ability and power, but He has that. Before the words are on our tongues and leave our mouth, He knows them. So somebody that knows our very being, our comings and our goings, when we wake up, when we lie down, of course, He would know our problems. And if He didn't care about our problems and our worries that we drag about with us, then He wouldn't have given us Jesus Christ as a means in which to be able to allow His Son to bear our luggage, our burden upon the cross. Pastor John was trying to go through his whole sermon for last week as we're sitting at the Connecting Center before a client came. And it was actually rather entertaining to have a whole sermon crunched into 5 minutes. But he made mention of last week that he had asked the question, what do we sing when I surrender all? Do I surrender some? No. We're to surrender all. But what do? We surrender some. We are afraid to give up what is part of our calling to trust upon the Lord. And we do not surrender all. He also made mention of the images of baggage and luggage. And some of you know that I work with the Upper Wabash River Basin Commission. I also am a volunteer out at the state park. And when I got certified as an Indiana Master Naturalist, woohoo! Yes, I can teach and lead hikes and do all types of stuff, all for free. I went ahead and I got my bag of Master Naturalist supplies. I would have brought it in, but it's too heavy. It has a reference book for every living creature at Wabash State Park. In that case, there is a large notebook for making notes and observations of what is there. There's a pair of binoculars. There's trash bags for cleaning up trash. There is a first aid kit. There is a bee sting kit. There are Kleenexes. There's hand sanitizer. And when I want to mark something for future reference, a GPS unit. All in this bag. So I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. I'm going to go have a practice hike. I threw that bag on my shoulder. After about 300, 400 feet, Russell was asking what was slowing me down so much. It was all the stuff I was carrying. We stopped and I had to pare down what I carried. But we always carry more than what we need at the moment. We always want to be prepared. But the sad thing is some of the baggage that we carried is our emotional baggage. Our sorrows, our hurts, and our fears. Does the Lord know your struggles? Yes, He knows and He cares. And He doesn't want you to continue to carry them anymore. The Lord knows the weight of your worries and is willing to help you with them. He is willing. That is His heart and His desire. His love and compassion is there to help you with these worries. You do not have to bear them on your own, though at times we feel we must. It's our responsibility. No, it's your responsibility to accept the Lord at His offer. So we go to Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We are wearied. We are burdened with our troubles. And we need to go to the Lord in that. He will give us rest. He is the one that cares for us. And for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What's the other yoke we carry around? That's the yoke of our worries. What will people think of me? Well, am I doing the right thing? Is this worship service perfect enough? Is everything coming together well? Am I presenting myself as a person that has it all together? These are the yokes of the world, fears and expectations. But His is none of that. Once we give up the yoke of our worries and take up Jesus' yoke, we will be free to do what He commands. Once we set aside the burdens that we have, we give them to Him. We will be free to do what He commands. And what is that? Well, we go to Mark chapter 8, verse 34. he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." We must take up the cross. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Now that whole his cross, or her cross, is a point of confusion in modern Christianity. Sometimes we think that's the burdens we have to carry. If you end up having bad health, maybe that's a cross you're to bear. Maybe that's the suffering that you're to endure. If you're stuck in a bad job, you're to bear it. That's the cross you're to bear, that suffering. Or maybe you're in a bad relationship, or you and your spouse are not communicating well. That's the cross you have to bear. Wrong. We have deluded ourselves that our day-to-day human worldly sufferings is a cross we are to bear. We give those up to the Lord. The cross He calls us to bear is the cross that leads to salvation. The cross that carries that message of salvation. That carrying the cross that each of us is to have is similar to the yoke. It's not the yoke of the world which is heavy, which is exhausting. It is a different type of yoke. It is light. But yet, and it being physically light in weight, it brings light, as in photons, to the world. We are to shed ourselves of this excessive luggage so we can carry what is important, the cross. So we can take that message to people. So that at times when people put guilt and weight upon us, you call yourself a Christian and you did that. I came across a pastor this week that blew up and cussed at one of his parishioners. And I was thinking, first thought in my mind, and he calls himself a pastor. But there's more to the situation and there's more stress in that situation. We have failings. We're not all perfect. Although that one pastor, I think he does think he's perfect, but that's a different issue. And it's none of the pastors you know. So you don't have to worry about that. But we have to take up Jesus' cross. But we can't carry that cross if we're carrying luggage. Have you ever seen some of the churches in town in the past several years will pick a time either during the Lenten season or spring or early summer and go around town with the cross? One church did it. The police was called on them because somebody thought they were selling something without a license. Well, they were selling something, but they weren't going door to door. They were just reminding people to take up your cross and carry it. And as they went through town, people were reminded of that message. We cannot carry that cross. If we were to be them, if that was to be our task to carry a cross to a town, how many of you would be able to do that with the baggage and luggage that you carry as far as emotional pains and struggles? If you had to physically give that a three-dimensional space and put it into a bag or carry-on, and you had to carry that and the cross, you wouldn't be able to. So we need to give our burdens to the Lord so that we can fulfill the task He has for us, and that is take up the cross. So, what is that luggage that we carry? The author of the book that Pastor John shared a little bit with me has these words, the worry ledger. And I almost think that it should be done in a different tone. It is now time to reflect upon the worry ledger. You know, it had a dramatic effect, since my son doesn't know the reverb button back there. So, the worry ledger. What is this list of things that we hold on to our hearts that allow us not to see the Lord? That allow us not to see the Lord. I'm going to use a connecting center. I know you guys might be exhausted because John uses it many a times in his illustrations. But the leaders of the connecting center, community care, each week we pray. And what I find funny is no matter when we set a time to pray, the first time always fails. Always fails. Either between issues in our own personal lives, as just being men or women, things that need to be done in our churches or for the people we serve, or other interruptions with community care. But by the time we get to that point when we can pray, to be there in prayer, we sometimes cannot pray. because we have this weight of worries, this long list of things that need to be done with people and for people, things to help people make it through the day, make it through the week, make it through the month, to stay in their home. And it can be quite crushing. And you're always thinking of the next emergency. And one of the things we have to do in prayer is to surrender that to the Lord, so that we can be in His presence. He's already with us, but we are so caught up. It is almost like we have these weird blinders on, like we're a horse pulling a plow. We can't see ahead of us, we can't see to the side of us, and we can't see the Lord. We can't see the Lord. So there's a long list of the worry ledger. And we'll just go through several of them. The first off is carrying too much. Not caring too much, but physically carrying too much. When I was helping out with the youth group up at Aussie United Methodist Church, the youth group finally was able to convince the ladies in the kitchen that they can help. Yes! It took a while. Because you're not sure, if you're one of the ladies in the church kitchen, if you can trust the people to do the job right, because you got an expectation of perfection to meet. So we finally got to the point where, yes, the youth could help. And we got all excited. We reported for work, and we're ready to cook or serve. No, you youth. After the meal is over, bring the dishes in. Okay, that wasn't what we were planning. We were planning on something big. But we will do that. We promised to help, and you allowed us to help, which is a first, so we will do that. We'll bring the dishes in. Well, one of the guys in the youth group, who was also later on to go on to the football team at Norwell and then bow out because of a knee injury, he wanted to make sure that he did it fast and efficient. Remember the kid with red hair, Laura? Mm-hmm. So, here we are in the gymnasium over at Aussie United Methodist Church. The round tables, 8-foot round tables, dishes are being gathered up, and usually it's all just styrofoam and plastic cups. No, they got out the good glassware and the good plates that said Aussie and United Methodist Church on them, imprinted. So he gathers it up, and he sees there's a lot to be done. So he wants to carry double load. He didn't bring a tray with him. He carried 2 stacks of plates with who knows what else on top of them, went through the swinging door, and caught his elbow on the door, and one stack crashed down. I'm there. There just went our youth group helping ever again. Shattered. All because he was carrying too much. That is a very simple analogy for what we as adults do in our lives. We carry too much. And when we get bumped, we drop something and we have a disaster and mess to clean up. Sometimes our schedules are too full. We double and triple book our schedules. Sometimes we overcommit ourselves to the point we do not allow ourselves rest. How many of you at some point in your life said, well, if I just go ahead and I get this last thing done, I work on it at home from 9 to 11 or midnight, and then I get up early at 5 in the morning and do a little more work on it, then I'll be able to get ready to go to work and I'll have it all done. And then you're dead for the next day of work. You don't have enough rest to prepare for the things of this world, let alone enough rest, because your schedule is too busy and too full, to come to the Lord, to give time to the Lord. So our schedules. Sometimes we willingly take upon ourselves tasks that are way bigger than ourselves. I always find it interesting with the type of work that I do as a chaplain. Half of my ministry is moving people. And I dread it. And not as much as my son Russell, who has to be my helper in many of these times. But I have people that move from one situation to another. And they're like, Pastor, can you help me move? Sure, I can help you move. And early on, no problem. I'll help you move. And my son and myself would go ahead and help the person move. And it seemed to be okay. That was about 10 years ago. Actually, my son didn't help too much. He carried the small boxes at that age. But now, as I'm in my middle 40s, as I wrestle with some issues of a sciatic nerve that's pinched occasionally in my back, I can't carry everything that I used to carry. I can't move everything that I can used to move. So I have to ask people to help. And that's something for somebody who is a type A personality very hard to do. But I physically can't carry what I used to. Sometimes we offer to help people. Whatever you're going through, I am there for you. And in that struggle, they call the middle of the night and they need to talk. And we're not sure we have that energy to do it. It was in my first year of ministry, a young man who was an entry-level officer in, I forget if it was the Marines or the Army, I forget which. But he called me in the middle of the night to ask me theological questions about the Quran versus the Bible. And when he went off to war, I said, call me anytime. Well, I didn't understand the fullness of all that he went through. In that hour and a half conversation, I was blown away by the struggles of what a soldier had to go through in Iraq. The threats that were continuously around them, the paranoia that it brought, and then to have in this whole added confusion of another culture, trying to teach that everything is the same God, and it's not the same God. The God of the Quran, the God they call Allah, does not have the same personality or nature as the God we worship. There are some things that point to the same direction, but it's not. And in those long hours of the night for me, as he finally had an opportunity to call, I realized that this was a lot more weight than what I had promised to be able to carry. I tried to do my best, and it was something that needed to be broken out over several phone calls, and we never got that opportunity, as he called from Iraq. Sometimes we try to carry too much. We need to be there for people, but we take upon ourselves an added level of responsibility. We can't do everything for everybody else, even if they're unable to do it for themselves. We cannot be caught up in that worry ledger of carrying too much. Our schedules need to be freer, and we must not overcommit ourselves. Otherwise, we'll exhaust ourselves. Next one, past hurts. The example I have for you of a past hurt comes from a woman. She ended up having a stepfather. And the stepfather was a rather ruthless, greedy, but yet rich man. As she started to go off to beauty school, he bought her a car and said, this is your gift for going to beauty school and making something of yourself. And then a couple weeks later, he turned around and said, here are the payments that you'll be making on the car. Wow, what a gift. Well, the whole family went to church. But she decided to marry a Methodist, and she was a Lutheran. This did not bode well with her stepfather, who was in the church leadership of the congregation she was with. And he wielded so much financial power that he scared the pastor. And when this Lutheran went off to marry this Methodist, if you remember a long time ago, you weren't allowed to do those type of things. Her stepfather, had her excommunicated from church. The pastor was afraid of what would happen to the church's finances. He was afraid the church would fold up and close if he said no and stood up to the stepfather. So it was easier to excommunicate his stepdaughter. And as the decades have gone by, this woman has not been able to connect with the church because she was excommunicated. Her stepfather was so vile, for lack of a better word, when it came time for the reading of the will, he had a provision specifically for her. And to my stepdaughter, you owe me, and I forget how many thousands of dollars, for the car that I bought you. Oh, did I mention that after he excommunicated her, he took the car back? He, in his will, was charging her for a car that she never was able to actually fully own and was actually taken away from her. Her cousins and aunts and uncles, with the lawyer there, collectively voted to strike that clause out of the will. and to restore some inheritance back to her, a percentage of the inheritance. But because of that hurt, she can't go to church. She can't go to a Baptist church, she can't go to a Methodist church, she can't go to a Lutheran church, because in herself she hasn't given up that hurt to the Lord. She was excommunicated, so she's not good enough. She didn't see that it was the sin of her stepfather that was the issue. Those emotional hurts. I'm hurt, so I cannot trust, so I cannot move forward. That's an example of a past hurt that directly goes into the boundaries of inhibiting or stopping the relationship with the Lord. This person continues to pray to the Lord. This person listens to hymn music and reads the Bible, but at the same time does not participate with the church because of that hurt. Will not relinquish that to the Lord. And that's not even her own doing. It was a power control of a very old and vile man who none of his children liked out of his first set of children. Past hurts. What is a past hurt that is holding you back? Somebody in your family betray you? To the point where when you see them in town, you can't think of anything other than the frustration, the anger, and the emotions? Do you mutter to yourself as you go through your day over a bad situation, or how a friend might have done something, or how at work they took something away from you that should have been yours? Prestige, promotion, income, raise. Those are things of this world. We need to surrender them up to the Lord. Another one, identity and pride. Identity and pride. My brother and I come from what you would not call the right side of the railroad tracks. We grew up in a mobile home park. The rest of you would just call it a trailer park. And the idea of my dad when he married my mom was that we would go ahead and we'd live in the trailer for about 3 years, and then we'd move out to the country and build a nice hobby farm. Well, with struggles with work and that never came to be. And so he went and turned his energies into that little trailer lot. He had the only trailer lot with a fish pool, with a water fountain, with landscaped like a golf course in a very small area. But we were there. To this day, my brother will not let anybody know at his place of work that he grew up in a trailer park because of that issue of pride. That's something I don't necessarily advertise myself because we have a lot of impressions of what trailer parks were, and him and myself were extremely lucky because we lived in one that was actually a retirement park. It became a retirement park. So you didn't have all the noise and the distractions of most of the other trailer parks. There are very strong social rules that bound the neighbors in behavior. And also I found it rather lucrative to live in such a neighborhood because retired people always need somebody to shovel their snow and mow their grass. Great thing when you start becoming a teenager. But my brother will not let anybody know. When he started dating his wife, when you see her, don't mention the trailer. I was just overwhelmed. And then later on, after they're married, and there's a possibility of my seeing some of his in-laws, don't mention where I grew up. Wow. This woman loves you. Her parents love you. They trust you. They approve the marriage. And you're still afraid of telling them where you grew up? Obviously something happened right because you're a manager of a nonprofit. I think you must have done something right, but can't tell where he came from. Pride. Dysfunction within the family. We want to continue to be able to have the impression that we are perfect in all ways. We don't have any struggles in our family. Our kids always listen to us. So we put up this facade about as deep as a movie set facade, about 6 inches deep and about 2 stories tall, to hide who we are. And we got to keep that facade up. We got to keep it painted. We got to keep it maintained so people think that we're good. There can't be any problems within my family. There's nobody that ever got caught up in alcoholism. There's nobody that ever got caught up in drugs or went to jail. So we create this facade. Or there are no problems between me and my wife. This pride comes before us and trips us up so much. Romans 12:3, for by the grace given me, this is Paul speaking, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. Don't think of yourself as more highly than you ought to, but sober judgment. We should not elevate ourselves and allow that pride to be that baggage, because the problem is with pride, you have to hold on to it to keep it. And as soon as you let go of it, you have lost your pride. What about identity? Who we are. Who we are. We want to continue to make people think that we're good people. And we are good people. But we also want to make them think that we don't have any struggles. Debts, not being able to take care of finances. That's part of our identity in American society. You got to have somebody that's got it together, man or woman. But sometimes job situations don't work out. Sometimes we take upon ourselves more debts and burdens than we can carry. We have to take those things, the parts of our identity that hold us back, the parts of our pride that hold us back, and give them to the Lord. What about bad friends? Over and over and over again at community care, I meet with people that are recovering meth addicts. Recovering meth addicts. I see some that succeed, and I see more that have failed. Why? Because they go back to their old friends, their old neighborhood, their old ways of life. Meth is an easy example because, that's something we can hate. But what about in our own lives? Do we have friends that hold us back? Friends that might lead us astray? Friends that might not necessarily allow us to be able to be part of a church? One place I worked, there was another gentleman and myself. We were the only Christians, or at least professed Christians, on the whole shift. And our choice was this: either stick together and encourage one another, or to go ahead and deny God and not receive any ridicule from the co-workers of ours. We opted to continue to stick together and not to listen to those friends of ours that criticized God, that did not have a full understanding of His grace, not a full understanding that He isn't in the instant, He's in the eternity, and that our relationship is developed over time, and we see His grace more and more as we come closer in giving our hearts to Him. Friends, 1 Corinthians chapter 15:33, don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. We might have people in our lives that are bad for us. Often I've seen a situation where a guy or a gal will fall in love with somebody that's not good for them. They never really consummate the marriage. They never bring things together. And the negativity of that relationship, of a bad friend, for whatever reason, they're attracted to the excitement of the relationship, I guess. I don't know. It holds them back. It keeps them out of the doors of the church. It keeps them from praying to God. And eventually it adds additional luggage. Well, I'm not a good person, so God won't love me. So bad friends is another one. Another, situations we can't change. We worry and obsess about these so much. How will I take care of? And you fill in the blank. I'll give you an example. Starting about 2009, 2010, I started working with a young man. He came from Nebraska, but I originally found out he was from the south side of Chicago. I found out his dad was a gangbanger, a dealer. And in the course of my knowing him, his mom eventually moved up to Michigan and forgot to take him with her. He was left as a loose end. He was a victim of fetal alcohol syndrome, so his thinking wasn't always quite right. So, in my youth of my being a pastor, I feel very old nowadays compared to back then. With God's power and the power of the congregation, we shall make this right. Yeah. I worked with a gentleman. We got his finances switched over so that I could help him pay for rent and utilities. We got him re-enrolled in school. We got him special ed services so that he might be out of the classes, so this mental confusion he has might be overcome. He might gain life skills. We even fill out an application where in the future he would be able to go to a group home. But sadly, that would be 3 years off in the future because there's so many applicants for group homes nowadays. And we didn't even know where in the state it would be. I just know that in 3 years, he would be able to be in a group home somewhere in Indiana. Well, in the midst of this, he did not relinquish his identity of his father. Remember I said identity is one of those luggage things? He wanted to be a gangbanger. And gangbangers party. So him, at 18 years old, a student in one of our local high schools, at the apartment that I helped him get and we took care of, while I was at home tending to my family and my pastoral duties, he decided to go ahead and listen to a friend, a 23-year-old friend, that said, "Hey, you got a place? Let's go party at your place. I'll bring the alcohol." 11 o'clock, I get a call from the Ossian police. Again. They have arrested him for underage drinking. Later on, after we worked together to go through the whole home detention scenario, I had a meeting after the end of his last home detention meeting. I asked my mom to take him home. I had to go back to Bluffton Christian School and finish something. She and my son and him and one of the friends from school were all in the car together. She pulls into the apartment complex. She thought it was funny that she was following a police officer. And then after she pulled into the apartment complex, 2 other cop cars came and blocked. And then the officers came in their favorite pose. When you have an officer with his hand on his hip, that isn't because he's aching. That's he's ready to draw. They took that kid. He had been doing something very, very illegal, unbeknownst to me. He was bipolar. He sold his medication for money because that's what gangsters do. And then he did something that gangsters also do. He beat up his girlfriend until she would sell her medications so he could have the money. Fortunately, they did this to an undercover officer. He went to jail. Well, lo and behold, he's not supposed to get out until next year. Indiana, in its great infinite wisdom, has decided that he's to be out now. They dropped him off at the Fort Wayne Rescue Shelter. Immediately I get phone calls. "Pastor Neil, I can't do this. I can't follow these rules. I don't understand what they're talking about. Get me out of here. Take me to Bluffton. Get me an apartment. Get my money. Find my mom." The guy was beside himself. But everything he shouted at me on the phone, he shouted before he went into jail. Previously, I tried to help him with the place. He trashed it. Him and his girlfriend punched holes in the wall. And I and the landlord got to be able to clean up after that. Had to deal with the stigma of, "Oh yes, one of the guys you helped went to jail for being a drug dealer." "Ah, that's interesting, Pastor Neil." I am not able to help this guy change. He needs to be in a group home. We don't have those group homes available for him. His mom is in one state. He's got an aunt in another state. Neither have come to help him in this situation. He's asking me, gives me calls at midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning. "Come and get me from the rescue mission." I know the rules of the rescue mission. You're not supposed to be calling anyone at that hour. And he has food and shelter, but yet, in his confused mind, he can't accept it. He can't follow the rules. He wants everything, but is unable to interact with people to make it happen. If I was to bring him down to Bluffton, I know right away if I brought him to a hotel that we would have the manager of budgeting giving me a call and saying something was wrong. There's nothing I can do for this young man other than pray. He wanted all of his identification material. Well, last night he lost all of his stuff. I held on to his identification material so that I could give it to the probation department and they can hold on to it for him because he's not capable. I can't do anything in the situation. I would like so much, as I did in those years past, say, yes, with the power of God in the congregation, we'll make this man a real man, and he'll be able to know God. He's acted like he's known God, but he's never accepted God. He's gone through the motions. He even claimed to be Catholic, and his mom told me, oh, he's not Catholic, he's Lutheran. Wow. Don't know what got into his mind. But there's nothing I can do to change that situation. I can spend my hours of each day worrying about him, and I do spend minutes of each hour worrying about him some way. But all I can do is offer prayer and wait for that opportunity when those tools come together. Not me by myself, but a group of people working together to help transform this kid's life. His path was set back on the south side of Chicago. Situations we can't change. Perfection. And this morning is a good example of everything that's not perfection. Voltaire, a great philosopher that is credited with saying, perfection is the enemy of good. Perfection is the enemy of good. If you always go for perfection, you're never done. You have a diminishing level of return. As you get to 90% perfection, you put more and more energy in to get to 91 and 92 and 93%. But you're never going to be to perfection. You remember, I'm trying to remember, if it was Dove soap, they claim to be the purest at 99.98% purity. That is a fact that in chemistry, that's about as pure as you can get any mixture. Perfection is the enemy of good. The example we have is pretty obvious, comes from the Bible. Luke chapter 10. Martha and Mary. Martha had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. You've been there. You got a meal to prepare. You got a house to clean. It's got to be done now. The relatives are coming. Our friends are coming over. Oh, I'd hate those times. Make sure you get everything swept. Be sure to sweep in the corners. There's always something. The cat knocked something over and you got to clean up the potted plant the cat knocked over. Help me. Lord, tell her to help me. And Jesus responds, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. You are worried and upset. That luggage, those worries were to give to the Lord. But only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Mary, who is sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to Jesus, listening to his description of God's world, God's kingdom. That cannot be taken away from her. But in that pursuit of perfection, Martha loses out. We have to be careful of perfection. Perfection can paralyze. We get so obsessed with it that we can't complete something unless it's perfect, so we complete nothing at all. We have a big problem with that in our modern world. We at times have to accept things are not going to work out well. At times, those dishes are going to fall and hit the ground. At times, we're going to have egg on our face. At times, we're not going to be able to help everybody as we want to help. And we will be embarrassed because of their situation. We can't always wait for perfection. How often are we to give these worries to God? How often? Once a week? Sunday, as we're here at the cross and in the bulletin, we have this week green sheets that we are to write our worries and cares on. Do we go ahead and do this once a week? Do we do this every day? Well, if we look at Paul and how he lived, Romans 12. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and living and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Our giving up our worries, our trusting in God is a spiritual act of worship. This is something we are called to do. And how often? How often are we to do it? 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says, I die every day. I mean that, brothers, just as surely as I glory over you in Christ Jesus our Lord. Daily, Daily we give these to the Lord. Not once a week, not once a month, not when it becomes overwhelming. We give these to the Lord daily. And He is there to listen to us, to talk to us. So, in just a moment, there is going to be a time of quiet reflection. You're going to be asked to bring up your sheets. So if you haven't written anything on your sheets, if you haven't thought of anything, take the few moments before I conclude the sermon to gather everything together, to put it down, even if it's one thing. I got mine here. Care for that kid. And you will place your offering and also your paper at the cross, because the Lord wants to take those worries away from us. He wants to free us up so that we're able to come to Him, not distracted, not looking over our shoulder, not looking at the past, but looking to the future with Him. Every day. Giving up your worries to God, it's not an instant thing. And at times we feel that because we can't do that as Christians, we're not good enough to be with God. There's that old perfection coming in again, because we can't be perfect. It takes time. It takes a willingness to give up our worries. It takes reflection so we know ourselves and we know the Lord. It takes prayer and it takes faith. Faith being trusting that God will take those worries and cares that we have. He will do that for us. You need to say to yourself, I trust that God will be my help. I trust that God will be my help. And when you trust, you will see how God takes those worries, how Jesus carries them to the cross. And in that, you are now relieved of these burdens, of these worries, this excess baggage. And you can focus upon what God calls you to be. To be the best man or woman, boy or girl. To be the best wife, to be the best husband, to be the best brother or sister, to be the best in-law. Whatever it is that God calls you to do, you are free to do it. The load of worries is too heavy for you, and it's too heavy for me to carry. This is why God, in His infinite wisdom, knows that we cannot do this alone. And in Psalm 55:22, cast your worries on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fail. Cast your worries upon the Lord. At this time, I ask that you go into a moment of just silent prayer and reflection, which is common in the Lenten season. Offer your worries up to your Lord. Offer your cares and concerns. And after that, bring up your sheets as they're collected, the worries that we have written down. And then also bring up your offerings as well. Take this time for silent reflection. For the Lord is present and is willing to hear. He can carry your load. Amen.